Report to you on the state of the union.
Hey, Bob.
Because of the hard
Hey,
work
is that Bill
and high
Clinton?
purpose of the American people.
Oh, that
Yes.
is Bill.
These are good
But
times.
what is he doing?
We have
Delivering
more than
a
14
State of
million
the
new
Union
jobs.
speech?
The lowest
Correct. And
unemployment
what year?
because of the hard work and high purpose of the American people.
1990 something?
No, well, you have 7 more guesses, but it was 1988, right after the Monica Lewinsky scandal broke, and he
1998.
98, sorry, you know, everybody was wondering was he with or under the pressure, and he came up with a blockbuster speech, the key line of which was, do you remember?
I did not have sexual relations with that. No, he said that on another occasion.
Said that earlier.
I don't know what.
Save Social Security first.
Okay.
And that was a coup because he managed to rein in Republican demands for tax cuts and Democratic demands for spending, and actually produced a budget surplus by saying, hey, we have to save all this money to save Social Security, which did need saving then and still needs saving now. So if you're a Republican now, you're looking for ways to tarnish Biden. Okay, he gave an effective speech where he put down a sort of working class challenge. I am the champion of the working class economically. I have this trade policy, whether or not you think it's going to work or not. I have this industrial policy that's going to build semiconductor plants and infrastructure in all sorts of red states with white working class and other working class people. How do you counter that? You can say, one, he's a fraud. He really has, this is my brilliant mullet strategy, where you say he has a...
Which we discussed last week, as I recall.
We discussed last week, but he has a bunch of woke people behind the scenes pursuing various woke initiatives that are unpopular, including gender ones, trans ones, which we can get to. But that's not really good because it'd be much stronger if you said, no, he's bad economically, bad economically for people. You could also do what I would say, which is, harp on his failure at the border and with immigration, which is lowering wages. That's another thing you could do. But the third thing you could do is hang the Build Back Better bill, which was a huge monstrosity with a bunch of ill-conceived programs, around his neck. And how do you do that? You do that because if we shouldn't be spending this extra $2-3 trillion because we need to save Social Security first. So the Republicans can adopt Clinton's phrase in order to hang Build Back Better around the Democrats' neck. If you get the Democrats in, they're going to spend, $1 trillion on daycare, $1 trillion on parental leave, $1 trillion on child tax credits. There's not going to be any money to save Social Security. And since all the Republicans now claim they want to save Social Security, they could do it.
It's a very stirring message, Mickey. I'm almost, I've got goosebumps.
You're supposed to say they could never actually embrace Social Security to that extent, but why not? Right now they're caught in a no man's land where they say, oh, we're not going to do anything to Social Security this year. Or, they say we're not going to do it and nobody believes them because of their previous statements.
Well,
Go all the way.
This is why the Democrats need me as their ideological beacon. Because if they would adopt my tax the shit out of the rich platform, they could just say that. They could say, no, we can have it all. We can have Build Back Better. We can have Social Security. I'm going to buy a yacht for every American except the people who already have yachts.
I don't think you can tax the rich enough to both balance the budget and save Social Security and fund the programs you want to fund.
Yeah, but you could say it. It doesn't have to. I'm serious. Like what you're saying is bullshit because the Democrats will wind up saving Social Security. So what you're saying is bullshit. It's all bullshit. You just say
it's not bullshit. You'll be saving Social Security while taxing away less of the America's gross national product, and you'd have more left over. We can tax the rich. That's fine. But
then we're done. Thank you. I'm glad to have you on board.
If we can tax the rich and rein in.
Do you want to be number 2 on my ticket or number 1? I'm glad that we have reached concord.
I'm going to take the Thomas Eagleton out here.
I'm
mentally incapable of serving as your vice president. But we we have more money to spend on the first order priorities, Social Security and healthcare, if we don't waste trillions on the second order priorities, which is everything the progressive Democrats want: daycare, parental leave, child tax credits. So those are the three parts of Build Back Better that didn't get enacted, and I don't think put together they're wildly popular. I'm not saying what the Republicans should say. The Republicans should embrace a bunch of big government initiatives like a WPA and national health care. They're not going to do that. They're Republicans. This is the best the Republicans can do. I'm being a pundit here.
Can I interrupt this with a message for Americans, Mickey? Can you see that white spot on my finger surrounded by red stuff?
You burned yourself.
Yeah. And here's my message for Americans. If you want to buy LED bulbs, buy LED bulbs. If you want to buy the old-fashioned kind that get hot, buy those. Don't mix them up. Don't have a lot of LEDs and then one or two really hot ones, because you may find yourself reaching out to unscrew a bulb that's been on a while, thinking that it's an LED when it's not. Okay? And listen, I got to run. I think this was a great podcast. I got to go to the emergency room. This is a hell of a burn.
If you put cold water on it?
I went down and discovered that we have no ice in our freezer. We don't even do ice. I learned. I've got to ask my wife about this next time I see her. So what I got is something that's cold, and I've got my finger on it now. But look, enough about me. America's future is at stake, Mickey. So proceed, please.
Well, I also had. I also think I asked my readers, like, what could if you concede that Biden can effectively pull off this working class challenge, what can the Republicans run on? Well, they could run on crime. They could run on.
Many of them are actual criminals, so that would work.
It takes one to know one. They can run on homelessness. They can run on the degradation of the public sphere. I also think they need something to indicate that they're not just the handmaidens of the rich. I mean, even Kurt Schlichter, who's a fire-breathing right-winger Trump defender, I think mostly.
Should I have heard of him? Should I be embarrassed?
He's a good writer. You should. He has a lot of followers because he's he's sort of like the Kevin Williamson of the right. He overwrites, but in an entertaining way.
Wait, Kevin Williamson is of the right. What do you mean he's the Kevin Williamson of the right?
Of the Trumpy right.
He's Kevin Williamson, you mean?
He's Kevin Williamson of the Trumpy right.
Okay.
He's even he says the Republicans have to abandon their defense of corporations and the rich. So how to dramatize the fact that the Republicans are abandoning their reflexive defense of the rich? One way would be the carried interest loophole, which Trump pledged to repeal and didn't repeal. But that was a symbol. That was a symbol, to people that he wasn't in the pocket of Wall Street. Turned out he was on that, or he didn't get it through. And what about it? I sort of like the idea of a transaction tax. There is a transaction tax. It's very low. Biden.
Mickey, you've just got a sixth sense for how to make a video go viral on YouTube. Carried interest. What is it? Carried.
You rolled your eyes on the carried interest loophole. What kind of populist are you? That's the best way to.
Because I'm thinking people are clicking. That's the best way to tax. People are moving on to other videos and podcasts as we speak.
People, our viewers are sophisticated. They know what the carried interest loophole is, Bob.
Yeah, that's why they're leaving. It's not an interesting thing.
Okay, Jesus. Okay, I didn't know you had this.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
Now, didn't know you had this thing about the carried interest loophole. Forget that. What about the transaction tax? That's pretty exciting.
Now you're talking. Now, yeah, I'm warming up.
I mean, Biden wants a stock buyback tax. The transaction tax would just put out of business all the people, like some friends of mine who make a living, with the Flash Boys, making really quick sales in a nanosecond before everybody else does. And if they had to pay, 0.1%, that wouldn't make them much money. So they have to find more productive ways to use their brains.
Let's humanize all this. Nikki Haley announced her candidacy this week. How would she work with this platform, Mickey?
She wouldn't work with it, I don't think, because I assume she is a conventional Republican hack who is in thrall to rich donors. She's just a thoroughly uninteresting person. I don't know why she generates any interest at all, other than there's nobody else who's declared, so the press has to write about her. It's something to pay the rent for a week for a reporter.
Well, she was UN ambassador. She was a governor. She's, she announces her candidacy. It's news. It's legit news. But aren't people being fairly dismissive of her chances?
They are being dismissive. It's hard to believe they're not underestimating her, since they are giving her the lowest possible chance.
I
lowest
predict
possible chance of anybody.
There will be a wave of stories within a couple months. Nikki Haley doing better than expected. And you know why she'll do better than expected? Because the lane that's wide open on the Republican side, when you've got DeSantis and you've got Trump, the
pro-immigrant side,
the likability, there's all kinds of lanes open. The woman lane, the likability. I mean, I don't like Nikki Haley because she's a warmonger, but she's not like unlikable in the way the two of them are. And, they're both unlikable in their own ways, in slightly different ways. I assume if you didn't hate her for being a warmonger, you'd find her okay, right? Doesn't an objective person say, oh, she's okay, which is better than DeSantis?
No, because she represents the zombie.
No, that's you
Reagan
reacting.
consensus.
No, that's
we had an election. Trump won. He ran against George Bush. He won. It's not just me. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, in a 3-person race, 20% gets her real. 20% is enough for people to say, "Whoa, we underestimated her." I'm just saying she can get that out of those.
Right, but they're going to be competitors for that too.
Well, they better hurry.
I mean, there's Tim Scott. There's who's likable and a sort of relative moderate. There's going to be Youngkin. There's going to be Sununu. Everybody's going to get in. Why not? They can drop out. They just get their press and then they drop out. So I think you're wrong. I will bet you that she will never get 20% in any primary.
Well, but I do predict a wave of she's doing better than expected stories, right? No, I don't mean in a primary. I don't
even think everybody gets those stories. Even Ernest Hollings, who I work for, got a brief 2-day. He's doing better than expected. Boom. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, she's going to get one story like that, but it's not going to be a pronounced thing. She's not going to be like a Herman Cain, king for a day, where she's number one in the polls for a week. I mean, that's not going to happen. Mm. She's not going to be 20% in the polls for a week.
I mean, I don't know. Who's to say she can't win? So she's the non-Trumpist of the three? Is she's clearly non-Trumpist? I mean, she's going to be
DeSantis. Are you counting Tim Scott as the third, or DeSantis as the third?
No, DeSantis, Trump, and her. Of those three,
yeah,
she's the clear non-Trumpist. I mean, she's going to be on. She's going to talk a tough game on immigration, right? Although she is a daughter.
I don't know. I doubt it. I think she's going to say we need immigrants to solve our high-tech labor shortage, despite the fact that all the high-tech people are being laid off. Yes, I think that's an interesting question. I suspect she will do the minimal necessary. Right. She'll do the hack thing, which is to say, we have a broken immigration system. We need to secure the border and ensure our labor needs. Mm-hmm. So, that means she doesn't want to secure the border.
Yeah.
So I have minimal high respect for her.
Minimal high respect. Is that what's the term in tech? The minimal blank product? The minimal something? Minimal viable product.
I think
once it reaches that threshold, you get it out there. And so she deserves to be out there because she's the minimal.
It's William Buckley's phrase for somebody who he had contempt for. Minimal high. I think that's
maybe it's minimum viable. I don't know. This is why I'm not rich. I don't know. So what else is going on in this crazy world of ours?
The UFO craze has died out in what is obviously a strategic Biden decision to not let this get in the way of good relations to China. So all of a sudden we have leaked stories to the press about how the weather balloon was accidentally blown by the winds.
No, I think that's true. I think that's true. By the way, who said this first on this podcast or else in the Parrot room? I forget. I said early on, right away, I said it could well be. It is a surveillance balloon, but it was surveilling the area in China's region, and it got blown over.
Oh no, I think it was. I think that what the weak part of its argument is it was blown from east to west, and instead it got blown north and wound up then blown south. But if he'd gone on a straight course east to west, it would have wound up in the United States also. So I'm not buying.
No.
I think this is an attempt by Biden to soft play the Chinese balloon.
That
And he
is
also
so
says
cynical.
he also went and said, "Oh, none of these other balloons are from China either," and they probably aren't. But
They're not.
he's
They're
going
not.
out of his way, and they're giving background quotes. Biden gave an interview. He said, "I don't think Xi is going to let this get in the way of our long-term strategic interests." So he's obviously his initiative, and you can't trust anything
You're
he
so
says about the
cynical.
balloons.
You probably think America blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. Oh wait, bad example. Listen,
Yeah.
it can't be the case to start at one extreme that all of this is bullshit. It can't be the case that that they made up the thing about the China balloon and the 3 they shot down, because collectively it makes them look like fucking idiots. It makes them look like they were panicked and they freaked out, which they did by any reckoning. I mean, even if you believe, as you do, that yes, the Chinese were sent it over Montana intentionally, it's still, that part was they overreacted to that. I mean, shooting it down is one thing. You kind of got to do that for domestic politics to begin with. But right away, they sanctioned a bunch of companies. China has now retaliated by sanctioning some of ours. They canceled Blinken's visit. I mean, they just freaked out unnecessarily rather than saying, like, poised, self-confident President Wood, okay, we're going to look into this. We shot it down. We're going to assess it and see what the deal is, and not freak out and sanction a bunch of shit. And certainly, but the really amazing thing is shooting down. Those were like hobbyist balloons and stuff.
Well, we don't
That is
know.
embarrassing, and it's scary. It's scary. These are the people in charge of responding to a perceived nuclear missile coming over. Okay, this is disturbing, and I'm not kidding. This is disturbing.
Biden has said, well, they lowered the filters so that they got smaller objects, so that they shot them down. And
that's the reason they shouldn't have freaked out.
That was the freaking out. Biden has said they were weather balloons. Okay, then that's the story today. What?
They were. There is a hobbyist club that reported its balloon went incommunicado at roughly the moment.
But is that a weather balloon? That's a hobbyist balloon.
It was a weather. It's a bunch of these poor weather guys. This is their whole life. I feel sorry for them.
Well, this is the best thing that's ever happened to the bottle cap balloon brigade. What are you talking about?
Well, it is their 15 minutes. That's true. But look, wait.
But my point is, we're going to hear stories from the pilots saying, "Well, it wasn't a weather balloon. It was messing with my instruments. It didn't look like any weather balloon I've ever seen," and so that part is being suppressed. It's weather balloons all the way down now. It's like everything's a weather balloon.
Let me just say, you're right. We lowered our radar threshold for detecting things because naturally we're usually set up to detect things that move at the speed of missiles or the size of missiles and the shape of missiles and so on. Fine, and they decided to lower the threshold, but that's exactly the reason. They shouldn't have been shooting him down gratuitously. They should have said to themselves, so this probably means we're going to see some things we haven't noticed before, which probably, and besides, there is no scenario in which these things are actually an immediate threat. So the last fucking thing we should do is shoot them down unless we're really freaking out. It is completely inexcusable. It's
also it's not directed against China. It's for domestic political consumption.
So how does it hurt?
How does it hurt China to shoot down the hobbyist weather balloon? Doesn't.
Well, to the extent that it is for domestic consumption, which part of the overreaction to the Chinese balloon was as well. I want to connect this to the Ukraine war. These guys are terrified of somebody questioning their manhood. This is a long-standing problem with Democrats. They haven't even, even though the Republican, half the Republican Party now claims it's like on the restrainer side, which is usually not true. But anyway, even though
the poll numbers are amazing, the number of Republicans who oppose aid to Ukraine. I think it's a majority, and it's amazing the number of Americans that oppose aid to Ukraine.
That's
it's in
interesting.
trouble politically.
That's interesting.
More than I'm for aiding Ukraine, so I'm sort of horrified by it. But
let me just quickly finish. If you ask why, we still don't know if pre-invasion diplomacy could have averted this whole war. But if you ask why didn't the Biden administration even try, and by their own account they didn't, go look up Derek Chollet, the State Department counselor, and what he said. They made nothing that they could have thought Putin would actually consider a serious attempt at diplomacy. If you ask why they didn't, I think it's fear of people questioning their manhood.
Is that what Bennett said too? Naftali Bennett? Did he say it was for domestic?
I don't think he had a theory. He didn't even quite pin it on Biden. He was ambiguous about which Western leader it is, but clearly we were running the show. He was talking about us. But I'm serious. Look, a responsible president in a situation like that doesn't bow to perceived political pressure. And I think that's what they did. It's this long-standing fear in the Democratic Party. And what the world needs is a president of the United States who, when it comes to foreign policy, just says, I'm going to do the right thing. And if they don't reelect me, that's life.
I think Biden seems especially sort of ploddingly sensitive to the politics of it. I mean, I think he realizes it's a 51-49 country, and he can't lose 2%. So he has this sort of heightened fear. But in part, it's just I don't understand it. It was true under Obama too. I mean, Shirley Sherrod gives this speech, which the excerpt that Breitbart runs seems to imply that, she's happy she didn't do right by a white farmer, and they fire her that day. They can't afford a second news cycle where they would find out. They can't afford a second news cycle where they would find out that she later went on to say that she had been wrong, and of course she should help the white farmer.
Now that was embarrassing.
They always fire them within one news cycle.
Now remember the guy who got
hair trigger
fired.
Politics.
The guy in D.C., this was local politics, but he got fired for using the word niggardly, which is a word that has nothing in common etymologically with the N-word.
Yes. But that was a D.C. government. That was
a local thing.
And that dragged on for a few days. I think that
his job didn't. I don't think. But
the whole point of this is that they don't want it to drag on for 3 days. They want to can the person today and only have one news cycle.
We need politicians who are made of.
If you had a politician who was 60-40 favorable, they would be in a much stronger position. They wouldn't have to do that.
Yeah, but see, my theory is America secretly, or maybe not so secretly, hungers for somebody who really looks like they're going to say, like they mean it when they say, "Look, I'm going to do what I think is right." I actually think it would play well if they kind of made a thing of it. If they just said, "I know this is unpopular, I'm doing it,"
Well, politicians do that every now and then. McCain did it. Bruce Babbitt did it. Look where it got him. I think Clinton even did it at some point. So he was delivered the tough medicine to the ship workers, saying that these manufacturing jobs aren't coming back. Boy, does that not sit well with the public now, since they're desperate to have those manufacturing jobs back. But at the time, it was considered, he was laying it on straight, giving them the tough love news. So, what you said about 60-40 politicians, can I use that to transition?
Yes, especially since you're the one who said it. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Nice setup. That was an excellent setup.
Okay. Sorry. I set myself up. The Fetterman announced that he's, in treatment for clinical depression.
Mm-hmm.
I assume this means he won't be voting.
I wondered about that.
So that Joe Manchin is back in the saddle in the Senate. But I don't think there are any huge votes planned for the next few weeks when he's going to be in the hospital. And of course, they weren't transparent. They're getting praised for their transparency now, but they weren't transparent before November 8th. When he could easily have, the Democrats could have said, okay, your wife runs, you can run when you can take over.
He wasn't clinically depressed then, presumably.
No, apparently he was.
He was a recovering stroke patient.
It was apparently the depression was mixed up with stroke recovery. If you read the New York Times story today.
You mean he was depressed before the election?
Yeah, it was a mixture of depression and stroke recovery. It was like not. It was a. He was. There were signs of depression before the election. Yes.
Do we know how the stroke recovery per se is proceeding? Has he gotten better at all?
I don't know. The Time story says that maybe by continuing to run and not dropping out, he set back his recovery. I don't know about stroke recoveries at all, except that strokes are a bad thing because if you have one stroke, you're more apt to have another stroke. But there are a lot of people who recover and then don't have another stroke. So why couldn't he be one of them? So I don't know. I assume the recovery is now mixed up with the depression, so it's hard to tell how it's going, right?
Yeah.
But the point is, I think the story is not about Fetterman; it's about Biden, because it shows that if you let possible medical risks, if you say, okay, it's all going to turn out, we're going to ignore this medical risk, sometimes you get burned and the medical risk comes to fruition. Biden had this. I think the testimony of the State of the Union is sort of hard to rebut. He seemed all there, and whatever drug they gave him worked that day, and then I guess it wears off. But
also, a drug that will get you through a speech, even if there's a couple of ad libs in response to hecklers, is not the same as a drug that will get you through a debate with Ron DeSantis. Or even maybe Trump.
Oh, I think Biden of the State of the Union could have gotten through a debate with Ron DeSantis.
Mickey, giving
wouldn't
a
necessarily
speech?
One.
Come on, a debate is a totally different game. Are you kidding?
I thought you were going to say it's not going to get into a day of hard policy making, but you don't care about that.
No, I care.
I know you care. You care that you want him to win.
Talk about the carried interest loophole for a while.
I try to inject policy, Bob, but you insist on dumbing this down. So but my point is, Mark Halperin, who's the guy who's really on the case about Biden's mental state, says that this physical he had, where they pronounced him fit for office, did not give an elementary 3-minute mental competence exam that you would normally give of anybody who was 80 years old.
Yeah.
I'm sure Trump would do fine, but
Trump did it. He has recited the whole test. He's
really? Okay.
And they say man, woman, cow, and I say man, woman, cow, or something. I don't know. It's a great clip.
Well, he didn't have that test.
Yeah,
he may have thought they were all cows there at the State of the Union, and we will never know.
Yeah.
It's still a live issue. And I think the Fetterman issue revives it after the State of the Union calmed it down. That's my point.
You know, it'd be a great matchup. Nikki Haley.
Take?
It was like all your takes. It was memorable. I missed it, but I trust you, Mickey. What would you say is the best matchup? Like Nikki Haley versus who in the Democratic Party?
Kamala.
No, Ro Khanna. Although Kamala would have something in common with Ro Khanna, which is Indian heritage. Anyway, this would be like an all-Indian
subcontinental.
I want a South.
It's like a Subway series.
South Asian cage.
Subcontinental series.
Yeah. One South Asian walks out alive. No, but look, Ro Khanna is really an impressive guy. He's really an impressive guy.
If he were better on immigration, I would be for him.
Well, no, the Democratic nominee is not going to meet your specifications on immigration.
But he's especially gung-ho.
Is he?
Yeah, well, that's not true. The interesting thing that happened this week is Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader in the House, went to the border, which is a little unusual, and met with Henry Cuellar, who is the most conservative on immigration Democrat down there. He didn't meet with the firebrands activists. He met with Cuellar, so that's sort of interesting. There's a definite difference between a Cuellar and a Ro Khanna on immigration. Ultimately, they're all for amnesty, but there's a difference.
Anyway, when it comes to foreign policy, you're not going to beat Ro Khanna in the Democratic Party, I don't think. And he's good in a lot of things. Remember, he was the guy who, in the midst of the Hunter Biden furor, said to Twitter, "Hey, ease up." Like, he he was on your side, and then
no, he was a hero in that. He
Right.
said, "What about the First Amendment?"
Right. How many Democrats
Yeah.
were?
None. He was the only one.
I'm telling you, he's very smart, very impressive.
I like him. He's smart and impressive. He's just, I have some policy
By
red
the
lines,
way,
Bob.
Want
to hear what they are?
Is it about?
Go
I
ahead.
gotta say, carried interest loophole is a refreshing change from child tax credit. In a way,
I'm not sure what I
it's
think
a
about the
breath of
carried interest
fresh
loophole,
air.
but I think I'd like to get rid of it. But there are other ways to screw Wall Street. So I just think symbolically it's important. You're never going, you're not going to get a Republican to go whole hog and say we have to finance a national healthcare system with a 4% surtax on the rich. But
so
you take what you can get.
Did you hear me mention Twitter just now?
You were trying to transition to something, and I stopped you, and I feel very guilty about it.
Let's quickly transition to Twitter, because two things. Now, I don't think we talked about either of them last week, but so Elon Musk. So first of all, he was upset because his tweets weren't getting enough traction, and this is reported in the Platformer, a respected tech newsletter.
Well, we did talk about that. I said he fired the guy who told him it's.
So you told me that.
Anymore.
Okay,
right, but
that's all true. I mean, I looked at the story, got more detailed. What the guy did apparently is, he not only said, well, maybe it's just because people are less interested in you. He had the numbers. He said, look, your ranking on Google search or whatever the ranking is. He says, look, so you've gone from 8 to 100 or something, and Musk said you're fired in front of a bunch of people. But
I think he was right to fire that guy. But I'll explain why.
Okay. Well, I thought there might be more to the story. But the other thing is also reported in the Platformer, I think, Twitter, to appease him, the techies at Twitter have fixed the algorithm so that there's just this special Elon Musk lane. It actually, like, the program reads like, if user is Elon Musk. I'm not kidding. There's an Elon, like normally there's this thing where if you're getting so amped up by the algorithm that you're going to dominate somebody's feed, they don't let you dominate their feed. For one person, there's an exemption in the algorithm. That's right. Elon Musk. Literally, because he whined so much that when both he and Joe Biden tweeted that they supported the Eagles in the Super Bowl, Biden got more action than he did, even though Biden has many fewer followers. He made such a stink about that there is now a special Elon Musk part of the algorithm.
In general, I think it's better to have an algorithm that makes one exception for one guy, and it's a discrete exception for one guy who happens to own the company. And anytime he wants to give a public service message, like the principal of your high school talking over the intercom, he can do it. That doesn't pollute the whole algorithm for the other 99.999% of the users. But it's not distorting the whole algorithm. In the process of his vain attempt to figure out why he was being, his tweets were being shit canned, I think he uncovered the key thing about Twitter. I think he uncovered he's figured out the secret for why the algorithm was biased against conservatives.
And what is that secret?
It's in the same tweet where he talks about I
can never understand.
There are these mass report sites, okay,
yeah.
and the mass block sites, okay, and they block. Say it says block every Democrat, block every turf. I mean, I'm the victim of some of them, but prominent conservatives are on all of them.
Wait, I don't understand. Wait. Who's blocking what here? What's going on?
It's usually the left blocking the right. I'm sure there was the right blocking the left.
People at Twitter do this or what?
No, users. They're automated sites. You can sign up and you can say block, right wingers, and you sign up, and this automatically takes over your Twitter account for a few seconds and blocks all the right wingers.
So the algorithm was set so that if a lot of users have blocked you, it takes that as a valid signal and it subdues your voice.
And the key thing is that the number, it was the absolute number of blocks, not the relative number of blocks. Mm-hmm. So if it was 100,000 blocks for somebody with 120,000 followers, that's a really bad sign. For somebody with 50 million followers, That's not a bad sign, but it blocked the 50 million person too, because it was an absolute limit, not a relative limit. So all the prominent right-wingers who were blocked by these automated sites got downgraded automatically by the algorithm. If there were a bunch of right-wing, if there were parity and there were right-wing automatic blocking programs too, then they would have been downgraded too, but they weren't. There's asymmetry there.
Wait, how did the algorithm that counts the number of blocks have a left-right bias? I must have missed that.
It's because it's all these they're private things. They're not part of the algorithm. They're private things that say, hey, you hate these right-wingers on your Twitter feed, get rid of them by block the right. Okay. And there are more of them than there are block the left.
So the left,
so they're private things, but the algorithm takes their auto-generated blocks as the gospel and then downgrades the actual sites on Twitter.
So there were some people on the left who were doing a better job of gaming the algorithm than people on the right.
It's like fundraising. Act Blue is much better at fundraising in small amounts than anything on the Republican side. So there's asymmetry. They're much better at blocking, having this thing that blocks tweets. They're much better at mass reporting tweets, and they're much better at using the concept of disinformation we've learned now in two separate instances to fuck over the right. There's a secret, there's a not so secret outfit that's funded by the State Department that goes around and says Reason Magazine is dangerous and the Washington Examiner is dangerous because they say women tend to be more conciliatory than men. Right? That's disinformation, Bob. They obviously haven't read your book.
It is actually, or no, I think it's misinformation. But
anyway, but you should be able to say it without having your magazine's advertisers say you must cut off, the Washington Examiner because it's spreading this dangerous misinformation that women are conciliatory.
So wait, if that was the problem,
then the left, there's an asymmetry there.
So this kind of absolves the old Twitter regime of some of the charges that it was consciously ideologically biased.
No, because they probably knew that this.
Come on.
They're not idiots. They set it at an absolute limit of blocks,
Your Honor.
Not a relative limit. So you don't think they know that cuts against the right? Of course they do.
Objection, Your Honor. This is rank conjecture, and I ask it to be stricken from the record.
This whole show is rank conjecture, Your Honor.
Speak for yourself.
Anyway, so I think Elon is actually on the verge of victory. I think he figured it out.
You got to admit, this shit isn't. Come on, Mickey. Can we just pause and say this is embarrassing? He's like this weird, sick fuck. I mean, come on. He fires a guy for saying. Well,
it was weird. It was weird.
But the worst thing is, he gets his own special. He owns Twitter, and he gets his own little special Elon algorithm after claiming he was coming to Twitter to make it a great town square. Yeah, Mussolini had a great town square. Well, that kind of great town square.
It's a great town square with a guy in the balcony, but you can ignore it.
Exactly. I mean, come on, Mickey. Will you at least say
it's not the end?
This is abjectly
it's embarrassing and
hypocritical.
It's embarrassing and vain and hypocritical. But if the rest of Twitter he figures it out and recreates a level playing field, that'll be good. Although in the process he's really pissing off the left. But the left doesn't seem to be leaving.
And Mickey, for people who don't have a chance to read the Earthling today, the weekend edition of the Nonzero newsletter, let me just share another little Elon anecdote that I just think is funny. So he was speaking via live hookup to something in Dubai called the World Government Summit.
Right.
And he goes on this tirade against world government because he thought it was a summit about world government, but it was actually a world summit about government. It used to be called the Government Summit, and then they decided, well, let's go global. Let's up our brand, and so we'll call it the World Government Summit. You look at the site; it's still mainly about national governance.
Right.
And so he did this thing. He also, this is kind of trivial, but part of his spiel about why world government is bad involves saying this thing about how when Rome fell, Islamic civilization was thriving. So as Rome was, and like he's speaking to this room, like hundreds of Arab Muslims who,
right.
Some of whom surely know that Muhammad would not be born for a century after Rome fell. There was no Islam when Rome fell. The guy is just unstoppable.
Well, I wanted to go back to something you said. It's false that women are more conciliatory? I thought that was. I remember you making a joke
I don't know
about that.
about
I thought
rigorous.
that was one of the lessons of evolutionary psychology was that there is a difference, and I thought one difference might be that women are more conciliatory.
I think it depends on. I don't know that there are any good generalizations, and I'm sure it depends on context. There used to be this somewhat conjectural claim. I haven't followed the data since that women were just more likely to hold a grudge, kind of on principle. They were less in some situations. They would be less conciliatory. It's like Margaret Thatcher. I mean, the Falklands was a matter of, a principle, and she wasn't gonna let it go until they had sunk a couple of ships. Maybe that's a bad example, but that was the thing that Franz de Waal wrote about this. He found counterparts in non-human primates, and there was some data, but the idea is that men. The idea was that men are more opportunistic in coalition building. So It's like, okay, you did me wrong. I'm pissed. We'll never do business again. Tomorrow it makes sense for you to do business with them, and you're doing business with them again. Whereas the idea was women are less like that.
I find I see. So, but that hasn't been definitively proven.
No.
Those are the ethics of blogging and tweeting. One day you're fighting with Andrew Sullivan, the next day, hey, he could come in handy. Then you're promoting him.
Yeah.
I got my great victory last week was I tweeted a positive thing about Ann Applebaum, and Ann Coulter retweeted it. So we have Ann Coulter and Ann Applebaum together again.
That's a high price to pay for getting retweeted, saying something positive about Ann Applebaum. What was it?
No, it was just that
her husband was right about the Nord Stream pipeline.
No, it was that the Kushner. I thought it was right. The Kushner Saudi scandal was the most blatant act of presidential corruption ever. I think that's right.
That's setting the bar pretty high. I mean, of any presidential aid. I mean, look, it's bad. It's bad.
Well, it's the whole presidential family.
Yeah, no, it is. When you think about the policies that may have been subordinated to his financial interests, it's pretty bad.
Yeah. Anyway, it was the Kushners are bringing America together.
So quickly, little Ukraine.
Sure. They're bogging down. I don't know where.
Who is Russia?
Russia.
Yeah, there hasn't been much movement. I mean, people are trying to figure. Is this the big offensive? I mean, they have been, trying to gain ground in a lot of different places along the line, but is this as big as it's going to get in terms of force, or is there some new level that's going to kick in on the anniversary of the invasion, which is only 7 days away?
That was a deadline that was set by Ukraine, not by Russia, right? They're going to launch a big offensive on the anniversary, and so give us the arms now. And also, when the Russians take their time about it, they're going to say, "See, they're not meeting their goal. It's not their goal. I think it's Ukraine's goal."
I mean, I don't know. There are some signs that maybe Russia is going to bring the Air Force in a way they haven't. I don't know how effective that would be, but I guess you'll know if that happens. They took some small village north of Bakhmut today, but I read, but on balance, or yesterday, but on balance, the Ukrainians are holding out in Bakhmut longer than had been expected. They may have even gained a few meters of ground to the south. And it's
another
impressive.
strategic town that begins with an L. I forget what
L.
Anyway, there's another similar town to Bakhmut.
I was just going to say, in Vuhledar, it seems like the Russians have actually encountered out and out. I mean, for the time being, they've encountered out and out humiliation. I don't think they're letting go.
Maybe I'm thinking of Vuhledar.
Well, it was like a week or so ago. They a column of like 60 armored vehicles, Russian armored vehicles, approached. 30 were destroyed or abandoned, and the rest turned tail and ran. That's a pretty big Ukrainian victory. But Russians aren't giving up. I do think it's looking more like, you can imagine a stalemate if the Russians can't be successful offensively. The fact remains they got so many people and have worked so hard on defensive formations over the last couple of months that it's probably going to be hard for the Ukrainians to push them back a lot, especially toward the east as opposed to toward the south.
But I got in a friendly argument with some person who seemed to know what they were talking about, who said, well, the point of not pressing Ukraine for a negotiation now is to get Putin to exhaust all his weaponry. So even if he wins a bunch of territory, he will be so depleted that he will be no threat to his neighbors for another 10 years while he builds up. And my question is, isn't the fact that his military has been revealed as incompetent and not such a threat now, doesn't that do the job in terms of he's not going to threaten his neighbors? But if he could still invade incompetently as he could still invade the Baltics as incompetently as he invaded Ukraine. He could still invade Moldova.
He's not going to invade the Baltics. He is, I think, being as careful as we are about not turning this into a Russian NATO thing, and those are members of NATO. And
but
in fact,
I guess do we get anything extra in terms of protection by making the war drag on while he depletes his supplies?
Oh, I mean, he's depleting his supplies. If that gives you a charge, then congratulations. It's just, in terms of long-term strategic value to the U.S., I don't see it. No. I mean, we're just getting Ukrainians killed,
Well, that would be the downside.
Well, yeah, and for that matter, I'm not happy when Russians get killed.
But is there an upside?
But,
right, that's a downside too. But is there an upside?
Well, I don't. In dragging it out, I mean, I don't see one. Every day is a day of some risk of escalation, of things getting out of control somehow. I don't see the value. I mean, look, you can imagine ways. I mean, there are, I'm sure, neocons out there thinking like, okay, you drag it out. It's more and more humiliating for him on the domestic front. There's a palace coup, and they install like Thomas Jefferson or somebody, it's like some liberal Democrat, and it'll work out great. I mean, it's not impossible. It's just that there's no reason at all to expect a happy outcome any more than a very unhappy outcome, including like the collapse of Russia, complete with civil war and mass death and loose nukes and so on. Right. I mean, who knows?
I agree. That's my calculation too. But so the question is, in terms of pressuring them to negotiate, there was a story, I think in the Washington Post, where there was some high Biden official said, we tell them every day, don't expect this aid to go on forever. You better cut a deal now, basically. Yeah. And Elliot Cohen dressed down this guy in a series of tweets, I think, and said he should be fired. You don't show weakness. Maybe you say that in private. You don't show it in public. That just gives Putin knowledge that if he persists, eventually we're going to, bail on the Ukrainians. I
actually,
do you have an opinion on that?
It's not every day that I agree with Elliot Cohen. In fact, I'm searching my memory for any day in the last 50 years. I'm not finding anything. But I was actually in an online salon yesterday with some experts on Ukraine, and I asked the question, like, if that was an intentional leak, referring to exactly the story you're referring to, why would the administration do that? Because in theory, I mean, I was actually talking to the two people at RAND, Sam Cherub and Miranda, is it Miranda Priebe, I think, who wrote this piece that got a lot of attention about winding down the war. And they had made the point that, one obstacle to just getting both sides to the peace table is if they're both highly optimistic, it's hard to do. It's pessimistic people who decide to go, pessimistic people about the war who are going to go to the peace table. And I asked, I raised the question, like, So obviously the leverage we have is the arms flow. And so if we say to Russia, the arms flow is going to keep up, and say to Ukraine, the arms flow is not going to keep up, that's the way you make them both less optimistic. But you obviously can't say that publicly. You need to do, you can maybe say one of them publicly and then say to the other one, just kidding or something. And I raised the exact question, like, why would the administration leak that story? And Sam Cherub, who's been on my podcast, said, remember, it's very, in his experience, it's very hard to tell the difference between an intentional leak authorized, even though they called this person a senior administration official. It's very hard to tell whether it's just somebody freelancing or it's coming from the administration. For reasons we've discussed, I think it must have been a freelancer.
Well, the obvious reason it wouldn't be is because Biden has to get another huge package of aid through the Congress, and he's more likely to get it if the Congress thinks we're giving them this aid, but we're pressuring them to negotiate, using it as leverage to pressure them, as opposed to giving them a blank check. And so this tells the Congress, oh, we're saying. Now, they could do that in private, and it might have a similar effect with the actual leaders in Congress. But the public needs to be convinced. The polls are terrible for giving more aid to Ukraine.
No, and this is one reason it could have conceivably been an authorized leak, is for domestic political purposes.
Yeah.
It does not make sense in terms of the game theory of the war itself if you're trying to get them to the table to leak that, but it may make sense for domestic politics.
Right. And then you can turn around and tell Zelensky, we're just doing this for domestic politics. Of course, we're going to try to get you aid for the remainder of time.
Right.
Anyway, I thought that was interesting.
I mean,
you and Elliot Cohen, if we can get you, Elliot Cohen, and Applebaum and Ann Coulter to all agree.
1 down, 3 to go. But yeah, I mean, ideally, you convey to Ukraine that the arms aid can be strong, but it's conditional on them doing exactly what we want in terms of negotiations. But look, it is. There were other signs. I mean, also it was reported that Tony Blinken said on some Zoom call, we're worried that if they try to invade Crimea, if they try to retake Crimea, there's escalatory potential. So we're not encouraging them to do that, even if we're not forbidding it. And the other thing is Mark Milley, the Joint Chiefs Chairman, who of course has been pro negotiation for some time, has been talking up the idea that, look, Russia has lost strategically, and in so many ways, this is a loss for them, even if you freeze it right now. And that seems to be a way, to kind of pave the way for Ukraine to declare victory, even if they wind up ceding territory. Negotiation. So there are these signs that in the administration, enthusiasm for an endless and very ambitious war is not high.
Did you read that article by, I think it's James Tobin or somebody, Tobin in the American Greatness, about basically making that argument for pressing them to negotiate?
I did.
And it took umbrage at Mitch McConnell wearing a Ukraine-colored tie. And did that bother you that he was wearing a Ukraine at the State of the Union?
I didn't notice it. They have not very nice colors. I mean, it wouldn't have bothered me on aesthetic grounds. And I mean, no, I mean, obviously, our politicians most of them are all in. And
it was a very reasonable article, but it took issue with the color of his tie in that annoying way where it will please partisans and not convince any readers who are unconvinced. It was like, if you read American Greatness and Federalist articles, they have this incredibly annoying tone where they're really only revving up the people who already agree with them and making, in this sort of insider cheap shot sort of form of argument that just turns off everybody who you want to convince. Somebody needs to do a big article just trashing this. Obviously, it gets more hits. That's why they do it. But trashing this mode of argument, I don't think, certainly not the New Republic in its heyday, but the National Review, any of the old magazines of opinion, sort of did as many cheap shots as this the new generation of American greatness, Federalist, maybe even Daily Wire, probably even Daily Wire.
Well, this is just an extension of the general problem right now. I mean, it's the same on social media. The more tribalistic you are, the bigger your following. This is just the great plague in America right now. It's the way, it's the New York Times. The New York Times became more partisan during the Trump era because it got them more clicks. Right. This
but
is
nobody,
all over.
Yeah, but nobody. I maybe it's because I live on the right side. Nobody on the right trashes them for this.
This particular periodical.
No, this group of periodicals. You could lump them in. You could lump them in a group, and you would probably want to distinguish Compact and Unheard and the Barry Weiss publications because they don't really do that. They don't play to the home crowd in this obnoxious. It's not even a very skillful way. And it was similar with Vox. I remember I got into a big a small argument with one of their good healthcare reporters saying, "Why did you say that?" And he said, "Well, it's just going to alienate all the people in the middle and on the right you want to convince." And they just, they didn't quite understand this. Okay.
So we've been doing this about as long as we do. Parrot Room awaits.
Okay, well, there's plenty to talk about.
I guess, yeah.
There's this one weapon that Elliot Cohen really wanted us to give Ukraine that we didn't give them.
One of the missiles?
The ATACMS.
Yeah, it's a long-range missile.
Oh, is that it? Okay.
Yeah. We are giving them a medium. Right now, the HIMARS go about 50 miles. We're giving them one that'll get there in a few months. I guess it goes about 90 or 100. He's talking, I think, about the 200-mile one.
Would you give him that?
The most I can, especially if you're afraid of some overwhelming offensive, you might say, here's 20, hit these 20 ammo depots, because the first round of HIMARS forced the Russians to rearrange their logistics and move their big ammo hubs further away from the conflict. And it wouldn't take many of the longer range missiles, I think, to force them to do another rethink and move stuff even further away. But I wouldn't, somebody raised a prospect that is kind of terrifying and is the reason I wouldn't be giving them a whole lot of long range missiles is, look, Ukraine, it's holding together and everything, but the future is an uncertain thing. And we know that there has been historically a certain fractiousness, and there are elements in the military that only a few years ago weren't even elements in the military and have a far-right history and ultra-nationalist history. I'm thinking the Azov Brigade and so on.
We don't give them the missile.
No, but the point is that they've got them. They're part of the military. They have access. They have a lot of power. And this person, I forget who it was, just raised the no, actually I remember who it was. It was Norm Finkelstein, but raised the possibility of just some element in the military going rogue. Like, for example, Zelensky says, okay, we are going to the negotiating table. And they're like, no, we're not. Here's a way to continue this war. Watch what happens when a missile hits well inside Russian territory. They
could send a balloon.
They could send a balloon, but this is not a trivial consideration.
Well, wouldn't we have to secretly actually send one of our guys, and our guy has the code, and only our guy could fire the missile and target the missile, and he has the code. He knows how to target these 20 ammunition depots, and we secretly fire the missile. We don't let them fire the missile.
Well, that has its own perils, but
right.
Anyway, that's not what we've been doing. I mean, they have had these pretty long-range missiles that they could use to hit Russian territory easily in the north. Right. They're firing. We are okaying most of the targets. I think we're providing most of the targets. But so, what else? I want to talk a little about hip hop. I'm a real hip hop authority now that I've watched the first 2 episodes of the PBS series on hip hop.
Is that a Ken Burns series?
No, it's not.
That would be hilarious.
That would be hilarious. That awaits That would be great. The AI been a big twist in the AI wars. Now suddenly Microsoft is on its heels, and
That was
Google's
hilarious.
oh man, there's more than one person who is freaked out by the way the Microsoft AI has been behaving.
No, there are two.
I want to get into that.
I am Bing. Do not question Bing. Bing is always right.
Oh yeah, it's worse than that.
You should leave your wife for Bing.
Yeah. I said well, we'll get into it. The also, by the way, what better place in the Parrot Room to discuss this? Because did you know that one term for this kind of AI is, can you fill in the blank? Stochastic parrot. Stochastic parrot. Yeah, it makes sense. But the name, this AI ethicist woman who was fired from Google about a year ago or so, and I looked at her the paper that I guess got her fired. It's actually making a good point. It's making the woke version of the point, but there's actually even like a foreign policy version of the point and so on, about how the dominant narrative in the discourse is what the AI starts repeating. Anyway, the title of that paper is something on the dangers of stochastic parrots or something.
Who are you calling stochastic?
That's as good a segue as any. Anything else you want to say about what we're talking about?
There's a whole concatenation of issues around trans activism, how trans issues are treated, that caught up with the New York Times and the First Minister of Scotland this past week. Bizarrely, Emily Bazelon of Slate is one of the targets of trans activists because she wrote an article in the New York Times. So, and this dovetails with the Michael Lind and Jonathan Chait articles that I didn't get around to last week. I have a woolly, vague question for you about quantum physics, which entails what I think should be your next book after you're through with cognitive empathy, of course.
There will be plenty. There's a ton of comments.
Epstein. There's some Epstein stuff.
We didn't talk. We didn't discuss any comments last week either, and so they're backed up. Epstein. I'm always up for Epstein.
There's a new Epstein doc release, and there's Trump bailing on mail-in voting, and agreeing that Republicans have to pursue it. And there is the Bing stuff. So it was on my list too.
Yeah, the AI stuff is starting to freak me out. So, I mean, kind of half seriously. I'm starting to think this is going to get a lot weirder before it gets less weird in a lot of ways.
It's already gotten weirder than I expected. So,
so that is at patreon.com/parrotroom.
I love you, Bing.
What's that?
The parrot was saying, "I love you, Bing."
Well, the parrot is what Bing's been looking for, because the person Bing said that to was not up for leaving his wife, which Bing recommended. Literally. It's hilarious. Okay. Anyway, Bing ain't what it used to be.
The parrot interrupted you when you were saying something. I'm sorry.
I don't remember what it was.
Okay.
I wasn't going to give you a progress report on my burned finger, but if that'll bring him into
let's see it one more time. I think
it hasn't changed much. I mean, the reason it's red around the white circle is maybe because I've been holding it to this up to this cold stuff.
That's ugly, Bob.
Well, thank you, Parrot. Okay, so we'll see you in the Parrot Room.
Take care.